Let me just wait. I'll do this here. All right, so I just want to talk about dependency injection and what that means. I'll also give an example of how we use it day to day. So dependency injection is basically when you have a class in Java and your one class is depending on the other class. It's a pretty simple concept. We use it all the time, right? But when projects get bigger and bigger, this becomes really difficult to manage and control. And so you have this difficulty of, first of all, you can't really unit test one part of your project or one simple concept of what you're trying to do, right? And also, whenever someone comes in and makes a change, like a little change on one of the classes, it impacts the whole project. Like you have to change so many other lines, right? And so what dependency injection allows us to do is it allows us to perform an inverse of control. And what that means is that we don't really care what happens to the class we're referring to, but so long as we're calling the method we're calling, right? Regardless of the changes that happens there, we continue our way. And it's like saying, for example, it's like a car and having an engine, right? Regardless of what they do to the engine, our car, the things that we do with our car doesn't change. And so it's really powerful if you actually think about it. Because when projects get bigger and bigger and bigger, when people come in and they want to make a simple change, like a simple feature change, to allow maybe something small, like, for example, if something breaks, unfortunately in projects, this happens a lot. And then you're in the release stage, right? People are seeing this breakage, right? You don't want to go back then and say, oh my God, right? Let's change this. And I mean, obviously you can revert back, but let's assume reverting back is not a problem. Let's assume that in this case, you have to make a change to a class. You don't want to start moving to different classes and start making a lot of changes, right? You just want to make it one place and it will affect everything else, right? And that's the whole concept of dependency injection, right? So right here, I'm going to, let me do this actually. I want to show you guys an example of what that entails. I've wrote like a simple piece of code here. Let me share again. Okay, so see. All right, so I wrote simple code here in Eclipse, and it's really simple, right? In dependency injection, there are other libraries. So let's assume there are libraries that do dependency injection, but let's assume those aren't there. Let's just go to the nitty-gritty and understand like the main concept behind it, okay? So let's say you have these different services. You have a drinking service, and then you have a food service, okay? These two are different kinds of services, okay? And let's say what they do is they just say performing food service or performing drink service, okay? Now, if I go into my main here, okay? And let's say, let me just comment this out, okay? We'll get to it a bit later. If I go into my main here, and let's say I want to refer to like a drink service or a food service, and let's say we don't have access to dependency injection, right? There is a class called customer in which I do refer to those services, okay? And let's just do this as well, okay? Let's just do this as well, okay? Let's say now, let's look at, I think with this example, you can infer the power of dependency injection. So let's say, for example, we have a new service, okay? Let's say we have a new service. Let's call it tipping service. In restaurants, you tip, right? So tipping service. Now, let's say tipping service, it can do anything. So let's just say it does a service. So do service, and then it does something very simple. Just a system out, print line, just tipping service doing. Okay. So now in my class customer, okay, if I want to add a service that customer can do, I can do something like this. Probably this is something that we would do, okay? So we would say tipping service. We'll insert it here in the constructor, okay? We might have like a variable here at the top called tipping service. And then in the constructor, we can just say this dot tipping service equals to tipping service. And then, and then we can say like public void use service, right? And then we can just say this dot tipping service dot do service. Okay, and this should work fine. But let's just understand the issue here. In main, I can do this. I can say, okay, customer, sorry, apologies about that. Let me turn this off. It's going to be a bit problematic here. Okay, all right. So here in customer, I can create a new customer, okay? New customer. But notice I cannot create a new customer without having tipping service. And this is a problem because I really don't care. I just want this customer to do a service. I don't care what kind of service. I mean, I do care to some extent, but the fact that I have to create a new service, this is problematic because you'll see it in a bit, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and create my tipping service up here. And then I'll call it my tipping service equals to new tipping service, okay? And then I can insert that tipping service there, okay? Now imagine a world where, okay, so now my customer can do a service, okay? So the customer can use service. The customer can use the service, okay? And I can go ahead and run this, and I think it should work fine. But you can try and imagine like, so yeah, tipping service doing. You can try and imagine, for example, let's say we're rolling out a whole nother service, okay? What is going to happen here? First of all, I have to go to customer because customer only accepts one kind of service, okay? And then I have to say, all right, what's this new type of service? And let's create a new service. Let's say maybe order service, okay? I'm imagining we're in a restaurant. Perhaps maybe I might be hungry, but let's just say order service, okay? And then this as well, we have to have do service for it as well, okay? And then system.out.println, right? And then doing orders, okay? And then now I have to go to my customers again, create a new order, add it here in the constructor, and then when using service, I have to just give like a string value of like maybe service type, do some sort of like switch statement here to choose the kind of service you're choosing. But at the end of the day, in the main, you have to create both kinds of services, okay? And you have to construct them. And then you can imagine a world where, for example, tipping service, its constructor has many other dependencies, and those dependencies have dependencies, and those dependencies have dependencies, okay? And so this becomes, this becomes very difficult to control and unit test and furthermore. So what I'm suggesting we do, and what usually happens in dependency injection is this. We have a service interface, okay? And the service interface basically generalizes what all the service classes are going to do. And this interface will have all the functions, maybe, depending on what your project needs are. But this service interface is going to have just a summary of everything that a service is going to do. Okay, just an interface. Okay, and then whenever you're creating a new service, you just implement that interface. and then you override that function to whatever service that specific class is doing. Okay, so we can create 100 new service classes, and we can override this do service, or whatever number of functions that are in the interface. Okay, we can override them. Okay, and then in the main, we just have to have like a service, like a drink service, and then create a drink service and then insert it there. And what's cool is that, so let me just show you. So here I had to create these different types of services. And because these were two different types of classes, I would have had to add them here in the constructor as well as like something different. Okay. But what I know is that, for example, here in this case, when we're using we're using the concept of dependency injection, I can have these two services. Okay, they're both services. Okay, and then in customer, instead of doing this here, and adding unique classes, okay, I can just have one kind of service. Okay, and this is obviously like the parent class of like, well, this is the interface that everything else is implementing to. And we can just create it here. And we, as you can see here, we don't really care how that specific service does its service, but we know that for sure it has some kind of doing service. Okay, so we can use the service as the customer with just being agnostic of like what's going on in that specific. It's like getting an engine and not caring how that engine works, but we know that it's going to have a specific function. Okay, we don't really care how it does it. Okay, and so here you can think of every other, like order service can implement, right? It can implement service, and we can override here, right? We can override do service. We can override do service, and ordering service can do something very different. So we can just say out dot print line doing ordering. Okay, and as you can imagine, so we can go back to main, and we can essentially, create these services like this. We can use those services, and in customer, I can set a service, and I can make this just an ordering service. Once I do this, when I set service, this changes this service variable. And so next time when I come down here and I say customer dot use service, as you expect, it should change the way the service works under the hood. Okay. So if I run this, you'll notice that the food service, when I use the food service, it's going to be different. It's going to say performing food service, performing drink service, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So this is really cool because, first of all, I know that for sure, I can, unit test these classes by themselves without having, to create them in main. And on top of that, I know that customer, it's not dependent necessarily on the functionality of the service, because I can just go ahead here and I can add different functionalities without having to go back to customer and change it as well. And this is where the power of dependency injection comes in. I was trying to write unit test on Visual Studio, but in this laptop, I haven't gotten that set up yet. And I would really, really love to show you guys examples of like unit testing this stuff. But unfortunately I can't, but I hope like this shows the power of that. And this is just a simple example. And it's really, really impactful when you're thinking about a huge project. Because in a huge project, you don't want to have too many, you don't want to have too many chains of dependency, right? Have a too long chain, like have a long chain of dependency in your classes, because that makes it difficult to unit test. It makes it difficult to read. And whenever you have a new feature or a new requirement, you have to make so many changes. Like, um, if all these services, like if all these services were different classes, um, then it just means that if someone were to come, like if you were working with a client or something and they tell you, hey, I want this new feature, you would have to go to customer, you'd have to go to the constructor, you have to, explain yourself from the beginning. Like you have to um, import a new class and everything, uh, and um, and then you have to make the necessary changes, do a lot of function changes, and it just becomes very, very difficult. Now, to the concept of code clarity. Um, so I think writing code clarity um, is as important as getting code done, making something work. Mainly because, first of all, it's very important to reduce the if you could do something in a few lines, and I don't mean like the concept of like being able to know those short forms of like writing Java, like, or writing like an array, or like writing like a loop, right? Okay, that's kind of the whole point of it. But if we are able to write something in such a short way, such that the future developer can make simple changes, and they can understand it better, I think that makes a huge impact. Because in my day to day, like at work, it's very, very important for me to not just get something done, but also get something done with some sort of like futurist thinking. Like if we're working in a team, let's say if I'm working with Desire, if I make changes today, I want to make changes in such a way that if the Isaiah comes and looks at my code, he can be able to, go around it and understand what Muhammad is trying to do. And if I'm doing something requiring, if I'm doing something, and Desire wants to add on to it, then it will be much better to build something on which Isaiah can just make a few changes, and then achieve his goals. Okay, and this can come in the form of like just very very intricate design decisions in coding, and one of them is using dependency injections. That's why I wanted to focus on it, because this week I had an issue with it at work. But if you're able to do something in a few lines and make it cleaner, and this of course comes from practice and also code reviews. If you're working in a team, you want someone else to review your code before you make that push to like a repository or something. And it comes from practice. So it's really, really important, and it's really, really impactful. Because messy code it slows you down. Yani, if there's something to do that can take you like a week, if the code is messy, if the code base, is corrupted, everything is just written like variable names are everywhere, the loops are everywhere, documentation and the commenting, it doesn't make sense. Classes are being created here and there. It really, really slows you down at the end of the day. And so the impact can really be felt, especially if the code base is huge enough. So that's all I wanted to talk about. I wish if I had got more time, I would have prepared more. I would have prepared more examples, more content to share with you guys. It's just unfortunate that the way I did my timing calculation was that I assumed we were ahead of time. Well, in Tanzania is ahead of time compared to here. So my calculation was I would have woken up at like maybe 7 and started this presentation at 9, but I had to wake up at 4. So I apologize for that. But if you do have any questions, please do ask me. And yeah, that's it. Yeah.